Another link in our seemingly endless chain of stories has been opened. Mullah Nasruddin was in London and had to go down to catch a train in the tube. But when he got down onto the station, there was a great furor going on because there was a man standing in the middle of the railway lines. And everyone was shouting to him, "Give me your hand, give me your hand," but he was just standing there ignoring them. So Mullah Nasruddin pushed his way through the crowd and shouted out to the man, "What is your occupation?" And the man said, "I'm a tax collector." So the mullah said, "Here, take my hand, and pulled him off the railway lines to safety just as the train came into the station. Mullah Nasruddin turned around to the crowd and he said, "Don't you know, haven't you learned by now that you never ask a tax collector to give you anything?" And the moral of the story is, of course, everyone is a tax collector. There was a peasant who decided that he would go on a quest. His life was very poor in the place that he was living in. So in his travels, he had to cross a desert. So he was very thirsty, very weary, and very hungry. But by happenstance, he came across an oasis where he was able to slake his thirst. Now, he was considered to be quite an ignorant man, a very simple man, coming from a village that had no education of any kind, and so forth and so on. But then, as he got up to leave the oasis, he felt as though he was different. It was as though wisdom had filled him. He looked up at the stars and he understood the meaning of astrology. It was amazing. And so he traveled on, and then he sat down to rest again and took off his sandals, and suddenly he wasn't wise anymore. So he thought to himself, "It must be my sandals." Because when he put his sandals back on, there he was, suffused with wisdom again. So he came to a great city, but everyone seemed to be in mourning because the king's daughter was fatally ill, and nobody had been able to find a cure for her illness. So it so happened that the wise man, in his wisdom, told the messengers that were in the streets that he could help. So he was taken along to the palace, and sure enough, when he was beside the princess's bed, the means of providing a cure for her were there for him. It just rose up within him. And so the king, of course, rewarded him very, very richly for this, but he had his ministers test this ignorant peasant man of his wisdom, and he was found faultless on every occasion. So it was validated that he indeed was a wise man. So the king asked, "Where does your wisdom come from?" And the peasant says, "Oh, it's my sandals." But what was not known was that when the peasant was at the oasis, a leaf from the tree of knowledge had stuck to the bottom of his sandals. So when the king asked him, "Well, where is your wisdom coming from?" the peasant said, "Oh, it's my sandals." The king said, "How much do you want for your sandals?" Well, the king paid him a very hefty price for his sandals. The peasant went off to live a very luxurious life. But of course the king couldn't be seen to be wearing a dirty pair of sandals. So the servants took them off and washed his sandals. You know, in many, many traditions, there are wise fools. You know, but Mullah Nasruddin is up there amongst them because he's a mystic. You know. But there was one such as these, wandering as a mendicant, and hungry and tired and thirsty, he saw an inn in the distance. So he approached the inn, and when he was invited inside by the innkeeper's wife, he asked the innkeeper's wife, could she give him some food? And she said, oh, we don't have any food here. So then she went off to the kitchen, and it so happened that our wise fool happened to glance in the kitchen, and there was a chicken ready to be cooked and some viands on the table. So he knew what he was dealing with. He had her measure, so to speak. So, going outside, he picked up a stick. When the innkeeper's wife came back in, our wise fool said to her, I have a stick, and if I have a pot of hot water, I can make the most delicious soup. Oh, the innkeeper is very, very interested. Oh, a stick that can make soup. Oh, she said, will you show me? And so she went out and she put a pot of water on the stove, and our wise fool took his stick and stood by the water and stirred and stirred and stirred until the water boiled, and then he looked at her and he said, would you happen to have some chicken giblets? Oh yes, she said. So they put the chicken giblets in the soup and he stirred and stirred. Would you happen to have a carrot too? Or something? Oh, she said, outside. So she put and other vegetables, stirred and after a while, the delicious smell of soup was wafting. So he took a bowl himself. So she had a bowl, wise fool had another bowl. This is true. Magic stick. How much do you want for this stick? Well, he pretended to ponder on this for a few moments and said, well, maybe if you give me the chicken and some of that viand, and that's the way it happened. Diving deep now. Diving deep. And for most times, one would imagine that diving deep means to go deep into the esoteric. What do these stories evoke for us? What is it that arises?
I'll try to make this one short. Diving esoteric or something like that. Use of the stick in this example, something like that. You could call it an underneath. So introduced, or my willingness to be dazzled by something came about long before somebody introduced the stick. deep, well, you would then have looked at the esoteric or something like that. I recognised that within that last